I'm now finished with Phantom Blood, which is part 1 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. As I stated before, I don't understand the claims of it being boring as it's filled with nothing but action, adventure, monsters, romance, betrayal, friendship, and so much more. Like, it quite literally has something for everyone. Phantom Blood tells the story of two brothers with a rivalry so intense it shakes the very world around them, the outcome deciding the fate of said world. In this video, we're going to be covering and reviewing the entirety of Phantom Blood, so let's jump into it. Our story starts out with a wealthy noble family, the Joestars. They have an accident one night and the Brando family shows up to rob the corpses. Yeah, it instantly starts off with grave robbing, already setting the tone for this show. When George Joestar comes to, he sees his wife has passed, but his son Jonathan survived, and he mistakes Dario Brando as his savior and vows a life debt to him. Easily the biggest mistake of this man's life. I can't tell if he had a good soul or if he's just that oblivious to the very obvious looking thief in front of him. If it wasn't clear, Dario is like scum of the earth kind of bad news. Now, since that night, 12 years have passed, and we seemingly see Dario on his deathbed almost as he's drinking himself away. He's also coughing like he's very sick, and then we also meet his son, Dio. Now, my first impressions initially of Dio in this situation was, okay, so he obviously had a very terrible upbringing. His mom also doesn't seem to be around, assuming that she's dead at this point, as well as his father is definitely terrible, as he robs corpses and even throws bottles at Dio's head. Now, weirdly enough, one of Dario's last acts is actually a good one. He gives his ticket to the high life that he seemingly never used, which actually really stunned me because Dario is obviously a very greedy man, so you'd expect him to cash in that, high life ticket that George Joestar gave him 12 years ago, but he seemingly held on to it all this time. And then now you see him give it to Dio, his only kid, and it's just kind of weird. It seems a little out of character for him, but I guess since he was on his deathbed anyways, he figured someone should use it. And just based off this interaction between Dio and his father, it's really not hard to understand why Dio turns out to be so horrible later in the story. After Dario's passing, you can definitely see that Dio has no care in the world for this man as he does spit on his grave. And then next, he actually vows to take the Joestars for everything they have, starting with Jonathan. Dio goes on to make Jonathan's life a living hell. Upon their first meeting, he kicks Jonathan's dog, beats him up, steals their father's affection away from him, lies about him to his friends, and even takes his girlfriend's first kiss while smacking her to the ground. Keep in mind, Dio is doing all these horrible acts to someone who very much does not deserve it. Jonathan is very charismatic, honest, and extremely noble, and all around a very lovable character, so it really makes you feel for him in the story when you see Dio continually do horrible things to him. And the worst thing about it, this whole time that Dio was doing all these horrible things to him, Jonathan viewed Dio as a brother. And that just sucks. I love how as soon as Dio's introduced, he's just pure evil from the start for no reason and starts a rivalry just because he can. After having it out in one final bout where we see Jonathan beat the brakes off Dio, which was hilarious to watch as no one was more deserving. Of course, Dio could not stand to lose to Jonathan, so he does one final terrible act. And he takes Jonathan's beloved dog, throws him in a furnace, and burns him alive. And this one really horrible deed is so far apart from all the other terrible things that he did to JoJo, and it really opens your eyes to the type of character that Dio is slowly becoming. Now, something to add in here is throughout the first episode, you see an ominous mask, kind of like one of those creepy looking masks that usually weirdos hang up on their walls as trophies, but this one has a specific reaction to blood, and then spikes pop out of it. I don't know though, guys. It looks pretty comfy to me. I'd like to add that they managed to fit all of that just in the first episode. Like, literally so much happens in the first episode. I just don't understand how people can't be hooked right off the bat. Like, I immediately dislike Dio, and I immediately love JoJo. JoJo, very noble and such an all-around lovable guy. You can tell he wants to just do good things in life. He wants to try to please his father. And then when Dio enters the picture, you can just tell he's like pure evil right out the gate, and you just don't know what he's going to do next. And he continuously surprises you and just one-upping himself in the horrible deeds he performs against JoJo and his family. And what I found really fascinating about Dio as a villain was the fact that he's so obsessed with JoJo and his family. He's so obsessed with power, and he's doing malicious and just all around evil things to people who never did anything to him, and it makes it so much more interesting. It's just so baffling, the whole situation, and you want to know what Dio's going to do next. We reach our next time skip of 7 years. It goes on to say that their rivalry was worse than Jack the Ripper, and all I could think of was,
it's about to go down.
Now at this point, Jonathan and Dio are 7 years older and they're absolutely jacked, though they didn't really explain this much, but I'm just going to go ahead and assume that they ate all their vegetables to grow up big and strong and not because they wanted to beat the hell out of each other again. When they return home, we find George Joestar is bedridden with an unknown illness. While researching the mask, JoJo stumbles on a letter from Dario to George stating how ill he was, which led to JoJo having suspicions of Dio poisoning their father. Now, in my first review of episode 1 for Phantom Blood, I actually had this very theory where I thought Dio was going to kill the father in some mysterious way, thus trying to take the fortune. So I guess I was kind of right there. Though the thing I found interesting here is that I should have known that Dio was capable of killing his own father, but it was a really nice little twist to find out later. After having his suspicions that Dio has been poisoning his father, they have another confrontation, and you really see a lot of character development in JoJo at this point. He stands a lot more confident, and even as Dio punches him, he tanks it like it was nothing. Dude was collecting major experience points in that 7-year time skip. We even witness his newfound fighting skills as he easily takes care of bandits while uncovering the truth of where Dio purchased the poison. JoJo even manages to make friends with one of the bandits who found him to be the most honorable man he's ever met. It is pretty amazing to see that Jonathan never wavered from his noble values despite everything Dio did to him. By this point, we find out what the mask does as Dio steals it to kill JoJo. We see Dio wasted drinking in the street just like his father, and him cursing his father's name and himself because he never wanted to be like his father, granted, but he is acting just like him in this moment and it disgusts him. So to test if the mask will be a good way to kill JoJo, he first uses it on some men giving him trouble, and it turns one of them into a freaking vampire. Now this was the big twist that I was really excited to see. And if you know anything about vampires, you'll know that this is now a new disgusting power Dio has discovered. While almost losing his life in this discovery, he is saved by the sun, which is a vampire's biggest weakness. Their next confrontation leads to JoJo getting Dio to confess to his crimes with his dad and policemen behind a curtain. This feels like some 1950s drama with them hiding behind the curtain like that. As usual though, JoJo falls for Dio's gaslighting and is caught off guard to him pulling out a knife to kill JoJo and steal his blood. While Dio attempts to kill JoJo, his father George jumps in front of the blade to save his son and relays his dying words to his son, saying he was too hard on JoJo and too lenient with Dio, and blames himself for Dio's actions. Of course, Dio is just a psychopath, so his sins are not exactly on George, but hey, the sentiment is nice, I guess. And you really see a lot of character development with George because, I'm not gonna lie, early on in the first episode, I did not like George. I thought he was a typical anime dad being too hard on his son, and his son is put under all this pressure to just be something that he's not. But all these years later, you see George do such a noble thing and basically be very vulnerable in front of his son and admit that he was wrong. So it was a really nice little comeback story for George, at least to me anyway. And you even see him take responsibility for Dio's actions towards JoJo and the rest of the world, and in reality, he did nothing but try to love and help Dio, and Dio was just unsavable at this point. I mean, the man walked in burning dogs and slapping women. Like, there's really no fixing that one. After getting the blood he needs, Dio throws on the mask and the policemen shoot him through a window. And of course, we assume he's dead, but he's very not dead and comes back with a vengeance as a vampire, now ripping everyone apart and turning them into zombies to kill JoJo. Last I checked, I don't really remember vampires being able to turn people into zombies. I feel like that's like a newfound power for vampires, though I could be wrong, but that was absolutely crazy to see that he can just create an undead nightmare. So I need to highlight the fact that JoJo was holding his own against a vampire Dio, holding him back via a spear, tanked getting stabbed in the shoulder with the spear while protecting his friend, and pulled himself up a balcony just to taunt Dio. Jonathan is legendary for emoting on Dio in that moment. Of course, realizing that he stands no chance in a head-to-head fight, he burns down the manor in an attempt to burn Dio alive faster than he can regenerate. Okay, side note though, Dio walking up the wall in a Chad pose through the flames was ridiculously cool. Something I really loved was the exaggerated fall JoJo had, all while being able to take off his belt, grapple onto Dio's leg, and yoink him down to the flames to impale Dio on a statue. Completely unrealistic, but hey, it's anime. Something else I love is that when Dio is beat, he always realizes how much he continues to underestimate Jonathan. With Dio seemingly gone, JoJo recovers and reunites with his lost love, Irina, in the hospital, who had run herself ragged taking care of him. This also lets us know that they had not seen each other in at least 7 years, as he didn't recognize her at first. Something you really have to consider here is that Dio ruined their relationship so much that they didn't even interact for the last 7 years, which is just crazy to think about. Because honestly, after episode 1, I thought they would just kind of continue being friends or at least stay in contact, but they literally just ceased all contact. But ironically enough, even though Dio was the one to separate them, he ended up bringing them together in the end as well. Now, of course, our main antagonist Dio survived the fire and slowly gains his strength back by feeding on people. He even casually recruits Jack the Ripper for his cause because, okay. Now, during Jonathan's recovery, he goes on a walk with Irina, and we meet our newest protagonist, Baron Zeppeli. And by the way, Zeppeli is easily one of the most goated characters in this series. He heals JoJo's arm with Hamon energy that is utilized with Sendo, an ancient form of martial arts. The energy from this technique is similar to sunlight, though the trick is you have to have controlled breathing to be able to perform it. Now, funny enough, as soon as they said that Hamon uses breathing techniques, I was like, I wonder if Demon Slayer kind of took some inspiration in that regard with the breathing techniques they use in that anime. And just a quick fun fact for you guys, if you do a quick Google search, it'll tell you that the creator of Demon Slayer actually listed JoJo's Bizarre Adventure as one of the titles that inspired Demon Slayer. At this point, JoJo learns that Dio has survived and goes on a training montage to get stronger and wield Hamon. Zeppeli also happened to be the one who unearthed the mask, and his own father tried to kill him after giving into the temptation of the mask. Seriously, what's up with the terrible fathers in this series? After the intense training, our heroes rush into battle to face Dio, but end up facing another one of his creations. This show gets pretty dark with animal abuse for some reason, like the zombie came out of the horse's body. That's literally insane. So remember when I said Zeppeli was goated? He's so disrespectful with his fighting style, you can't help but laugh. The man was drinking wine and handing out pain lessons with ease. And JoJo's next test being to defeat the zombie and not spill a drop of the same wine. Basically, liquids help conduct Hamon much easier, and it helped him locate and defeat the zombie with ease. I guess if JoJo ends up in any more dungeons, he just needs to have a handy-dandy water bottle and he's good. It's almost frightening how fast JoJo excels at training, I might add. Like, he learned this, a week ago and is already smacking everybody up. Next, we move on to Wind's Night Lot, which is a small town surrounded by mountains and the sea. When our protagonists arrive, they are caught off guard by a kid named Poco, who steals from them and lures them to a graveyard where Dio is waiting for them. Also, apparently you can use Hamon to run on water, which is just awesome. Like, I wish I could use it so I could just run across lakes and pools. I don't really need to do that, but it would just be cool to do, I guess. So, like, can they teach me how to use it? Next, Dio launches an attack with his undead army on them, but Zeppeli is about that life and attacks him head on. To put it shortly, though, he got stomped by Dio, like, stomped so bad JoJo had to interfere or Zeppeli would have been killed instantly. And tell me how when Jonathan interfered, it looked like a three-way rock, paper, scissors battle.
Show me rock!
Also, let's not skip over the fact that Dio freezes people now just by contact, making him further overpowered. Like, literally, the list of his powers just keeps growing. Now, through the confrontation between Zeppeli and Dio, we see Zeppeli's arm frozen to the point where he can't perform Hamon. But Speedwagon just kind of randomly pulls up his shirt and uses his abs as a defroster. They didn't really explain that one. That felt really weird, to be honest, and that was the only thing he really contributed to the battle. So yeah, it was super weird. I didn't understand that at all. Can someone explain exactly what he did? Because again, to my knowledge, they did not explain that at all. So very confusing there, but it was such a hilarious moment and so over the top. So what's pretty funny about this fight at this point is that Dio's like super overpowered compared to JoJo, but Dio still revives like 2 more antagonists, which are Bruford and Tarukas. And it's like, come on, man. You can do this, this, and this, and you're still reviving people to do your dirty work. It's kind of wild. JoJo goes head to head with Bruford, finding himself in an underwater battle, though Jonathan is pretty crafty and uses underwater air bubbles to perform his strongest form of Hamon yet, blasting Bruford out of the water. Bruford isn't a pushover, however, and goes on the offensive against JoJo. Though finishing off the battle, Jonathan hits him with a series of punches known as Sunlight Yellow Overdrive. I kind of feel like they could have workshopped the name a bit more there, but at the same time, with how dramatic this series is, it oddly suits the show. As we see Bruford go for a killing strike, Jonathan stands there relaxing himself and doesn't even flinch. I'm like, okay, he's just a total Chad now. This is ridiculous. he realized basically that his Hamon energy freed Bruford's soul from corruption. I'm not fully sure how that works in this situation, as every other zombie hit by Jonathan gets annihilated, but it makes for a nice twist to the story, I guess, where Jonathan earns Bruford's respect and his dying wish for Jonathan to wield his sword. Now, Tarukas isn't as redeemable as he has no remorse and goes on the attack. So here's where things get really dumb, as Jonathan and Zeppeli use Hamon to make a hang glider out of leaves. I have to hand it to them on that one. Not at all what I thought they were going to do, and it's probably one of the dumbest things in the first part, I won't lie. One good thing did come out of this hang gliding moment though, is this is where we learn Zeppeli learned Hamon from a man named Tonpetty, who is a master of Hamon and can tell the future by shaking your hand. He tells Zeppeli he will die on his journey of learning Hamon. It's pretty scary to learn that your life's work will be the death of you, but Zeppeli only sees it as more motivation. Like I said, he is just that goated that he welcomes death. Now JoJo and the gang get caught in a trap and separated after going inside the old castle training grounds. Now to save JoJo, his newfound friend Poco thinks back to the days of him being bullied. No longer wanting to be a coward, he musters the courage to crawl through the opening and pull the latch, freeing Zeppeli and Speedwagon. Zeppeli, now realizing that the events of Tonpetty's fortune telling of his death were about to come true, he lunges into battle against Tarukas. I swear to God, they do Zeppeli so dirty every time this man jumps into battle to be the hero. He gets dog-walked, like dog-walked. This time to his death by being split in half via chains. I am so angry that he died this early. I wanted to see more of Zeppeli. The only reason I can think as to why they would kill Zeppeli off so early is that he's kind of like a father figure or another friend to JoJo in a sense, and this was one more push that JoJo needed to be able to kill Dio. But I still think it was a poor decision to kill him off so early. I would have loved to see him continue on in the series. But again, you can't really get too attached to too many characters in the show. It's a kill fest. Alright, so naturally when you're split in half, you kind of die, you know. No blood flow, or all the blood is flowing out of you in this situation. But of course, this is anime. We see Zeppeli in his last efforts give every ounce of Hamon he has to JoJo, which I thought was kind of cool. I didn't really think you could transfer energy like that. And it's kind of like a Dragon Ball Z situation when Goku's like, "Give me your power!" And when JoJo gains all this new Hamon energy, his body goes under a change, and he basically he turns Super Saiyan. I mean, he looks like a Super Saiyan, and he beats the brakes off of Tarukas, purging him from the world in the process. Now, if I had to sum up the fight between JoJo, Bruford, and Tarukas, honestly, it's like, it was a cool fight, but it felt also unnecessary at the same time, and I feel like maybe this is where people feel like it kind of drags on the story for no reason. They used it as a way to further JoJo's skills and his resolve to finally finish off Dio, one being fighting Bruford and Tarukas, testing out his skills, and again, the other thing being killing off Zeppeli, which I just don't think was a great decision because he's such a cool character, and it's like, why kill him off? Now, don't get me wrong, the fight between Tarukas and JoJo was definitely really cool. We got to see a lot of JoJo's abilities and him just go nuts for once, you know? But it felt like what a lot of people were saying, that it takes away from the main story of Jonathan versus Dio. And while Jonathan versus Bruford kind of taught Jonathan to utilize his Hamon a little bit better and utilize it in more dire situations, it's just like, we didn't really need to see Bruford in his redemption story. It didn't really add anything to the story, to be honest, other than just kind of showing how good of a person Jonathan is, and we already know that. So I just felt like this sub little mini arc of him fighting these two kind of like more powerful zombies versus your standard zombies could have just not been placed in there, and I don't think it would have changed things too much. We could have just really seen Dio kill Zeppeli and had, like, you know, Jonathan have an explosion of, you know, power killing Dio later on, you know? Though I have to say that the story immediately grabs your attention again when you see Dio probably do one of the worst things he's ever done to date. I honestly didn't think he could outdo himself, but forcing a mother to serve him in an attempt to save her child, all while getting her to kill her own baby, is just horrifying. Like, Dio, my guy, can we take a break from being evil for 5 seconds? Back to JoJo rushing to defeat Dio, we learn that the villagers have now been turned into zombies, and they encounter a man named Dyer, who attacks JoJo in attempts to see how well he was trained. Now granted, this series is known for being ridiculous, but I've never seen such an insane move in my life, which is called Thunder Cross Split Attack. I don't know. You'd honestly think with the show this man just put on, we were going to see some devastating damage, but yeah, no. He gets headbutted and that's pretty much done. Next, we see Tom Petty and company arrive to assist JoJo in battle. I was a little curious as to why Tom Petty didn't want to shake JoJo's hand, my only guess being he didn't want to know JoJo's fate, like Zeppeli, so it leaves you wondering what is going to happen next. Next, we learn that Dio has kidnapped Poco's sister and even attempts to recruit her into his army. She refuses, of course, because naturally, who would just want to become a zombie? I mean, I guess immortality and super strength, but you're also mindless. I don't know. I don't think I would want to become a zombie, but a vampire, on the other hand, at least I have my, mind? I don't know. I know this isn't real, but I feel like that's a really big debate. I don't know. Would you rather be a zombie or a vampire? Let me know down below. Anyways, though, Dio sends his zombie to kill her, and just in the nick of time, JoJo arrives and slays the zombie. Jonathan now confronts Dio for the final battle, filled with hatred, vowing to kill him. And it's really shocking to see just how much of an effect Dio has had on Jonathan all these years later, early on in the series, where Jonathan is this young, sweet boy, and he's very noble and just loving. And after everything he's done, and now at the end of Phantom Blood, he seeks nothing but vengeance on Dio. Of course, though, before they engage in battle, Dyer interferes with his Thundercross split attack, only to get instantly folded. I laughed so hard when this man just got frozen to death. I'll admit, I felt these characters were pretty useless. The only thing they were good for was being a distraction for the zombies. That's literally about it. Because I thought Tom Petty was going to be this, crazy strong guy, but him and the other dude were just we're doing everything we can to hold back these zombies. Meanwhile, Jonathan's one-shotting everybody. I'm oh my, why are they even here? That's probably another issue that I had with Phantom Blood Part 1, was the fact that they weren't leaving much of an impression like most people were saying. I definitely agree there. I like Speedwagon and I like Zeppeli, but Tom Petty, Dyer, and the other guy, they didn't really leave that much of an impression on me that I cared about their characters at all, to be honest. Anyways, though, the final battle between Dio and Jonathan is easily the best thing about Phantom Blood. Jonathan, using his sword, slices up Dio countering by freezing Jonathan, and even going as far to playing with his carotid artery with his fingers. I have never seen something more disgusting and sadistic in my life by a villain. Dio was the perfect villain. Now, as I've stated multiple times, Dio continually underestimates JoJo, and JoJo had a plan for the sword being cooked in the fire, heating up the blade to melt himself and helping him deal the final blow to end Dio once and for all. With cheers and celebration, our hero can now rest as the big bad vampire is dead. Or so we thought. Years later, Jonathan and Irina get married and plan to go to the Americas, only to find their honeymoon crashed by Dio's servant. While pursuing him, we come across Dio, who survived by saving his head. I swear to God, Dio just won't die. His hate for JoJo is the only thing that keeps this man alive, I'm convinced. Now, probably the greatest piece of dialogue that Dio has is when he confesses how much respect he has for Jonathan, and I actually really like this moment because while Dio hates Jonathan with every fiber in his being, the fact that he was willing to admit how much respect he has for him kind of gave me a little ounce of respect for Dio. Though, of course, Dio ruins the moment as he usually does with his final vow to now take JoJo's body for his own by attaching his head to JoJo's body, shooting JoJo in the throat, rendering him unable to breathe and use Hamon. Realizing that Irina is in danger, he uses all the Hamon he has left to attack Wang, using him to rig the ship to explode. I just swear, JoJo is the most goated and tactical fighter I've ever seen in my life. He is always thinking ahead, and it's just insane. Now, we do see a pretty sad moment where he's pleading to Irina to leave him and get to safety, and she refuses and plans to die alongside her husband, which is actually a pretty bittersweet moment because we see Irina wanting to stay with her husband to the end because she already lost 7 years with Jonathan, and nothing was going to stop her from being with her husband at this point. And while Jonathan could have been selfish in this moment and choosing to let his wife die in his arms and for them to be together, this just further proves how much of a likable character he is. He chose to tell her to save the baby's life, protecting her one final time as the ship explodes, sending shrapnel everywhere, and fending off one final attack from Dio. He takes Dio's head into his arms and holds him tight, dying together. Irina survives and saves the baby. Overall, it's a pretty sad ending to Phantom Blood, I won't lie. I really wasn't expecting them to die so soon in the series, which was a disappointment to me to say the least. I really love Jonathan as the hero who never wavered on his morals, and Dio made for a very compelling villain as he embodied evil itself. However, if you consider all that happened in just these 9 episodes, it tells the story about a lifetime rivalry between two brothers, JoJo loving his brother to the very end despite his evil nature, and Dio coming to respect his brother who he hates to his core. It sets the tone for the series as to what kind of world these characters live in and the challenges ahead. While yes, it does have some flaws to it, it deserves its place as a fantastic start to the series and leaves you wondering what other bizarre adventures lie ahead. That's just my opinion though. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you enjoyed or disliked Phantom Blood. I always like hearing different perspectives. For now, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.